Back on the show, all about small business, jobs, and entrepreneurship. You're listening to Get Down to Business. I'm your host, Shalom, Klein, and I'm joined over the phone by Wayne Winegarden. States are reaping benefits versus burning money with energy regulations. That's the subject of a study that Wayne Winegarden, senior fellow at the Pacific Research Institute, has done an analysis with. Wayne, welcome to Get Down to Business. Wayne, are you with us? Wayne, are you with us on Get Down to Business? It seems that we're having a little technical challenge. I know Wayne has written a study from the Pacific Research Institute regarding regulating the upstream industry, getting the balance right, an analysis of which states maximize their resources compared to those that allow other states to take advantage of them. And Wayne and I actually just had a interesting discussion about states that are crippling energy production and the economic benefits that it brings with heavy-handed regulations. Once again, Wayne Winegarden is a professor and a senior fellow, the author of that study at the Pacific Research Institute. I know we're working on getting Wayne back on the air. He analyzed states like Pennsylvania and New York, and talked a little bit about energy regulation. Wayne, are you back with us on Get Down to Business?
I am back with you.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. Sorry, a little technical challenge over there. Once again, we have Wayne Winegarden, the Pacific Research Institute senior fellow and the author of that study I was just telling you about the impact of state regulations on energy industries. Wayne, we just started talking about it a little bit on the air, but what was the highlights? What were the headlines of that study? Which states are crippling energy production? Which states are sort of doing it right in your mind?
Well, the one most important one that's doing it wrong is the federal government. If we look at what helped drive our meager growth, and if we look at, like last quarter, we didn't even grow 1%. And one of the most important industries has been energy. And if you look at federal lands, there's so many costs, especially time delays, that the federal government imposes that you see significantly less production on federal lands compared to state lands. And so that regulatory kind of burden has reduced the amount of economic activity we can have. And when we looked at the different comparisons, so you have the same geological formation. We look at Montana and North Dakota, you see that Montana has a much more burdensome regulatory environment. And if you look at the amount of jobs, the amount of production, the amount of income, tax revenues, all of those things we're trying to create, there's a stark difference between North Dakota and Montana. Same thing when we look at New York and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania embraces fracking. They regulate it. They keep continuing to change their regulatory environment, but they have smart regulations to produce fracking from natural gas safely. New York bans it. And again, you see a stark difference in how the towns are doing, how people are doing between the two regions.
So, Wayne, talking about jobs, which we discuss so often on this program, I know the energy industry supports thousands of jobs and billions of dollars in economic activity. But I know in your study you actually analyzed specific towns, specific counties, including in Pennsylvania. Do you mind sharing some of those numbers? Because I think it's pretty dramatic when you look at the real impact on communities when there is a strict regulatory environment and the impact that it has on employment and that economic activity that you were just alluding to.
Oh, absolutely. And just to make the difference clear, so New York bans fracking, and Pennsylvania, it embraces it. And you have towns on the border in western New York and northern Pennsylvania, and that's where the oil's in both states. And you see that huge difference you were talking about. So whereas in Pennsylvania, they've linked about 70,000 jobs when you include not just the oil jobs, but also kind of the follow-on jobs. They've all linked to the fracking. And that 70,000 jobs is actually just the industry jobs. 70,000 industry jobs just connected to fracking, and over 200,000 jobs when you consider the retailers and the suppliers and all of the people that support those individuals. All of that has occurred on the Pennsylvania side, and there's been no job creation at all on the New York side.
So Pennsylvania embraced, you called it fracking, the modern drilling techniques, and added, as you said, more than 200,000 jobs. I believe in your study you say 214,000 jobs. And by contrast, New York, which has banned all fracking technologies, you're saying that they're going to lose $11 billion of economic output from 2011 to 2020. That's pretty dynamic. And you mentioned that the biggest blocker of some of this economic activity really is the federal government, and they need to get out of the way in order to spur economic activity. Connecting politics to this, what are you hearing from the two presidential candidates, now that we actually have two nominees for the different parties? What do you think will happen over the coming years? Do you anticipate the federal government getting out of the way, or many of the same policies continuing to be put in place?
I'm not optimistic, unfortunately. I don't see either of them doing anything significant to reduce those burdens, which we really need to, so that we're going to continue to see this headwinds against continued growth. And it's a real shame, because that's exactly what we need to do, is to bring back, to get smart regulations, smart taxes, and that's one of the ingredients to getting the economy going again.
So the federal government, again, we're chatting with Wayne Winegarden, the senior fellow at the Pacific Research Institute, about regulating the upstream energy industry, getting the balance right regarding states that are allowing the energy industry to take advantage of the various resources, fracking technologies. And it sounds like the federal government, unfortunately, are not too optimistic, will change regardless of whether it's Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton that ends up in the White House in 2017 for a 4-year term. But I guess that means that it's going to be a state level issue. And I know that already you've listed several states that, as you said, are doing it right, and then some states that are doing it wrong. What are some of the states that are on your radar as having the potential, both geographically, to make a real impact, as well as you see potentially changing in policy over the coming years?
Well, one state which has changed, which is very exciting, is Ohio. There's been a lot of good regulatory reform there. So, given that they're also part of that Marcellus Shale, I think there's a great deal of potential there. North Dakota, there continues to be potential. They've done a lot right. The Bakken formation has been a huge boon, and so that has not played out at all. And you have also the traditional plays, Oklahoma, Texas, which are continuing to kind of smartly regulate fracking, new techniques, and so there's a lot of potential in both of those kind of traditional oil play states. And Pennsylvania, again, they continue to benefit from their oil industry. It's obviously, as the prices have come down, the activity has kind of slowed down a bit. But again, oil prices go up and down, so you're going to see those jobs work with it. So when we're talking long term, those states are going to benefit. Interesting.
So as Wayne Winegarden, senior fellow at the Pacific Research Institute, has said, again, major impact, major tie between jobs and the regulatory environment of the energy industry. States like Pennsylvania that have been a little bit more loose have created jobs, while on the New York side, just literally the other side of the border, jobs are declining. So real connection. Wayne, fascinating study, and I know you've been involved in this and many other conversations on the subject. Where can our listeners read more of that study and find out more about the work of the Pacific Research Institute?
All of this work, plus a lot of other great work, is at pacificresearch.org.
pacificresearch.org. Wayne, we appreciate your time on Get Down to Business and would love to follow up with you to talk a little bit more about the energy industry and lots of other things that you're doing some great research on. Thank you for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, coming up after the break, we're going to have a fascinating discussion with a fantastic guest, a true entrepreneur and philanthropist, Jeff Ader. Jeff is involved in the Jewish Baseball Museum. He founded a school called the Walcott School. He is a restaurateur, started a restaurant in Lakeview, neighborhood of Chicago called Milt's Barbecue for the Perplexed. That's right, Milt's Barbecue for the Perplexed. Fascinating individual, and he'll be joining us on Get Down to Business right after our headlines. We've got a jam-packed show still ready for you. We've got more tips for you. We're going to be talking about retirement savings later on in the program. So don't touch that dial. You can always download podcasts on my website, shalomklein.com, and make sure you check out Tandem HR's fantastic Facebook page that shares so many great tips and advice for small business owners. You don't want to miss it. tandemhr.com.
For the last year,